Randy Moss.
Randy Moss.
Randy Moss.
Randy Moss. Randy Moss.
In the NFL, unguardable is usually a temporary label. A receiver gets hot for a month. A new scheme catches defenses off guard. A coordinator finds a matchup and exploits it. Then the league adjusts. Corners study film. Safeties rotate earlier. Double teams arrive. The magic disappears. That's the normal cycle. But Randy Moss didn't follow it. Because Randy Moss wasn't just a great wide receiver. Randy Moss was a coverage malfunction. The kind of player who made defensive rules feel outdated the moment he stepped onto the field. This is the story of the NFL wide receiver who couldn't be guarded. Randy Moss entered the NFL in 1998, drafted 21st overall by the Minnesota Vikings. And even that draft position tells you something. The league didn't fully understand what it was looking at. Because on pure ability, Randy Moss was never supposed to last that long. Randy Moss was 6'4", with a wingspan that felt unfair, speed that didn't match his frame, and effortless vertical explosion. But teams were cautious because Moss came with baggage. Questions about maturity, off-field trouble, and whether he could be trusted as the face of a franchise. Minnesota didn't care. Minnesota wanted the weapon. And the moment Randy Moss put on purple, the NFL discovered a new kind of problem. Most rookie receivers enter the league learning the speed of NFL corners. They get jammed at the line. They get knocked off their routes. They struggle with physicality. Randy Moss didn't struggle. Randy Moss accelerated. And from week one, it was obvious that cornerbacks weren't built for what he was doing. Because the typical defensive plan against a rookie is simple. Challenge him, press him, hit him, make him earn it. Randy Moss made press coverage feel suicidal. If a corner pressed too aggressively, Moss ran right past him. If a corner played off, Moss ate cushion instantly and turned a 5-yard window into a 40-yard problem. And the worst part? Randy Moss didn't look like he was straining. He glided, like the game was slower for him than it was for everyone else. Then the touchdowns started. Not little touchdowns. Not red zone, fade route touchdowns. Bombs. Back-breaking, morale-killing deep shots that felt like defensive failure even when the coverage was correct. Because against Randy Moss, correct coverage wasn't always enough. There's a fundamental defensive principle. Stay on top of the receiver. Don't get beat deep. Randy Moss made staying on top meaningless because he could win even when the defender was there. If the corner stayed in phase, Moss would stack him, then separate at the last second. If the safety rotated over, Moss would still win the ball at its highest point. If the throw was imperfect, Moss adjusted midair like he was built for bad passes. The ball didn't need to be perfect. Randy Moss made it perfect. By the end of his rookie season, Randy Moss had caught 17 touchdown passes. 17. As a rookie. That wasn't just a breakout. That was an announcement to the league that the position had changed. Defensive coordinators began speaking differently. Not, how do we stop him? How do we prevent him from ending the game in one play? Because Randy Moss could erase a defensive game plan with one snap. And that's what made him unguardable. Not just the stats, not just the highlights, the stress he created. When you face a receiver who can score from anywhere, you can't call defense normally. Safeties stay deeper, which softens the run defense. Corners play with more cushion, which opens the quick game. Linebackers hesitate before blitzing because the ball can go over their heads instantly. Even when Randy Moss didn't touch the ball, he distorted the geometry of the entire field. That's not just a star, that's gravity. Defenses tried the obvious solution, double coverage. But double coverage against Randy Moss created another problem. Because doubling a receiver is resource allocation. It costs you somewhere else. If you roll a safety over the top, you remove that safety from helping in the run game or covering the seam. If you bracket him with a corner underneath and safety over top, you're dedicating 2 defenders to one route. That leaves someone else one-on-one. And the Vikings, especially early on, had enough talent to punish that. So coordinators were trapped. Play him one-on-one and risk a touchdown. Double him and weaken the rest of the defense. That's what unguardable really means. It's not that you can't cover him. It's that every solution creates a new loss. But Randy Moss wasn't just a deep threat. That was the misconception that helped him destroy careers. Corners would play terrified of the bomb, backpedaling early. Randy Moss would break off a route at 12 yards, catch it casually, and move the chains. Corners would start creeping up to contest intermediate routes. Randy Moss would go over the top again. He controlled defenders by threatening space. He forced corners to play scared, and scared corners don't play aggressive. By the early 2000s, Randy Moss had already become a symbol. If a receiver caught a deep ball over a defender, the phrase wasn't "great catch." It became, "he got mossed." That doesn't happen often in sports. Very few players become verbs. Randy Moss did. Because what he did wasn't normal wide receiver play. It was domination of the air. And here's the detail that made him even harder to guard. Randy Moss didn't need volume. Some receivers need 15 targets to break a defense. Randy Moss could break a defense with 5. He could be quiet for an entire quarter, then score twice in 2 minutes. That's why defenders never relaxed. That's why coordinators hated him. He forced paranoia. But the story of being unguardable isn't just about the peak. It's about the moment the league thinks it has an answer, and then watches that answer fail. Because eventually, defenses did adjust. They did change coverages. They did throw bracket concepts at him. They did try to make him irrelevant. And for a moment, it looked like they might succeed. Then Randy Moss changed teams, and everything escalated into something even more terrifying. Because the most unguardable receiver in football was about to land in the most ruthless passing environment imaginable. And what happened next is why some players aren't just stars. They're disasters for defensive logic. By the early 2000s, defensive coordinators had finally accepted the truth about Randy Moss. Randy Moss wasn't a receiver you cover. Randy Moss was a receiver you manage. And manage is a defensive word that really means we're going to lose something somewhere. Let's just decide where. Because the NFL can adjust to almost anything. It can adjust to speed. It can adjust to route running. It can adjust to a great quarterback. But it has a harder time adjusting to a wide receiver who can win even when you do everything right. That was Randy Moss. The first major adjustment defenses tried was obvious. Press coverage with safety help. The idea sounded logical. Jam Moss at the line. Disrupt timing. Force the quarterback to hold the ball. Let the pass rush arrive. Keep a safety over the top as insurance. But press coverage against Moss wasn't a standard jam. It was a gamble. Because if a corner missed with his hands, even slightly, Moss didn't just win. Moss ended the play. Randy Moss was too fast for corners to recover once he stacked them. And Moss was too tall for corners to win at the catch point even when they stayed close. That combination is what made him uniquely unfair. If the corner played physical, Moss ran past him. If the corner played cautious, Moss ate the cushion and controlled the route. Then defenses tried the next solution, bracket coverage. A corner underneath, a safety over top. 2 defenders assigned to 1 man. But bracket coverage has a hidden weakness. It creates a void elsewhere. If you allocate 2 defenders to Moss, you are weakening the rest of the field. You reduce help in the run game. You soften seam coverage against tight ends. You expose the opposite corner in isolated matchups. You lose flexibility against motion and play action. And the Vikings learned how to punish that. If defenses tilted too hard to Moss, Minnesota could run the ball into lighter boxes or feed other receivers in one-on-one situations. So defenses faced a dilemma. Double Moss and bleed everywhere else. Don't double Moss and risk a touchdown every drive. And dilemmas are what make players unguardable. A third adjustment came later. Zone shells designed to keep eyes on Moss. Cover 2 looks where safeties stayed deep and corners funneled receivers inside. Cover 3 looks that protected deep thirds. Soft zones that dared quarterbacks to throw underneath. Defenses essentially said, we would rather give up 8-yard completions than get embarrassed deep. But that approach created another issue. It gave Moss room to operate. With soft zone coverage, Moss didn't need to beat press at the line. He could build speed gradually. Find windows, manipulate corner leverage, and then explode vertically when safeties hesitated. Even when the ball didn't go to Moss, the deep safety attention created space for everything else. That's what people miss about him. Randy Moss didn't just create production. Randy Moss created spacing without touching the ball. And then came the psychological element. Because defending Moss wasn't just about assignments. It was about confidence. Cornerbacks who got beat by Moss didn't just lose a rep, they lost their aggressiveness. The next snap, they gave cushion. The next snap after that, they hesitated. And when a corner hesitates, he's already dead. Randy Moss lived off hesitation. Hesitation is how you get stacked. It's how you lose the deep ball. It's how you get mossed. That word, mossed, isn't just slang. It's a legacy marker. Very few players ever become a verb. You got juked isn't tied to one player. You got trucked isn't tied to one player. But you got mossed is specific. It means a defender was positioned correctly, The coverage was good, and it didn't matter, because Moss went up, took the ball at the highest point, and ended your effort. That kind of dominance humiliates, and humiliation changes how defenders play the rest of the game. By the time Moss reached the middle stage of his career, his reputation had become a weapon of its own. Corners didn't just study film, they carried fear into the snap. Safeties shaded early, corners played off, linebackers widened in coverage to anticipate deep routes. Defensive coordinators tried to lean their entire structure in Moss's direction, but leaning leaves you vulnerable elsewhere, and every opponent knew it. Then the narrative shifted. For a stretch, people argued that Moss wasn't consistent, that he didn't always play hard, that he could disappear in games. This criticism sounds reasonable, until you understand what disappear meant. Sometimes Moss disappeared because defenses refused to let him beat them. Sometimes Moss disappeared because two defenders were assigned to him all game. Sometimes Moss disappeared because the offense simply didn't need him to win that week. But critics treated lower target volume as weakness. That misunderstanding would matter later, because it set up the most explosive revenge season of his career. In 2005, Moss was traded to the Oakland Raiders, and for a moment, it looked like the Moss story might decline. Oakland's quarterback instability hurt rhythm. Coaching changes hurt consistency. Defenses didn't respect the Raiders' passing structure the way they respected Minnesota's. And Moss' production dipped compared to his peak. People questioned whether he had lost a step, whether he was fading, whether the league had finally figured him out. But the league didn't figure out Randy Moss. The league figured out Oakland, and those are not the same thing. Because when a receiver is truly unguardable, context doesn't erase ability, context only delays it. And the moment Moss landed in a functioning elite passing system again, the truth returned instantly. That moment arrived in 2007, when Randy Moss joined the New England Patriots. And when he did, the NFL learned something terrifying. Randy Moss wasn't done. He was about to become the most unstoppable deep threat the league had ever seen, inside one of the most efficient offenses ever built. And when you combine Tom Brady's accuracy, Bill Belichick's ruthless roster construction, and Randy Moss's vertical dominance, you don't just get a great season. You get a season that breaks defensive rules entirely, because defensive adjustments depend on limits. And in 2007, the Patriots' offense had no limits. When Randy Moss joined the New England Patriots in 2007, it didn't feel real. Not because Moss was still unknown, by then he was already a legend. It felt unreal because of the environment he was entering. Tom Brady was in his prime. Bill Belichick was ruthless. Josh McDaniels was building a spread passing machine. And the Patriots didn't trade for Randy Moss to add a weapon. They traded for Randy Moss to end games early. Because the league was built around one idea: if you take away the deep ball, you can survive. Randy Moss and the 2007 Patriots made that idea collapse. From week one, defensive coordinators knew they were in trouble. The Patriots weren't just passing. They were attacking vertically like a team that didn't respect defensive rules. And Moss was the spear. His speed still looked effortless. His jumps still looked unfair. His catch radius still looked like a different sport. But now he had something he didn't always have in Oakland. A quarterback who could put the ball exactly where a defender couldn't. That changes everything. Because unguardable becomes inevitable when the throw is perfect. In the opening weeks, teams tried the obvious: double Moss every snap. But the Patriots had layered answers. If the safety shaded toward Moss, Wes Welker destroyed the middle on option routes. If the corner played off and a safety stayed deep, Brady peppered the underneath zones until the defense tightened. And once the defense tightened, Moss went over the top. It was a cycle, and it wasn't guesswork, it was engineered. There's a key concept in defending deep threats: don't let the receiver stack you. Stacking means the receiver gets directly on top of the defender's hip, forcing the defender to trail. Once trailing, the corner can't locate the ball cleanly. Moss stacked corners constantly, even when corners had help. Because his release wasn't just fast, it was deceptive. He didn't need 10 moves. He needed one step. The second defensive response was press him harder, force contact, disrupt timing, make the route messy. But press coverage against Moss came with risk, and Brady punished risk instantly. If the corner missed his jam, Moss was gone. And if the corner landed the jam but lost balance, Moss still accelerated into separation. Brady would put the ball 40 yards downfield before the safety could rotate over. Defenses tried cover two-man, the classic answer to vertical threats. Two safeties deep, man underneath. Bracket concepts built into structure. But cover two man has a weakness: the sideline fade. And no one ran the sideline fade like Moss. If the corner played inside leverage, Moss took the outside release. If the corner played outside leverage, Moss snapped inside and forced the safety to choose. And when a safety has to choose, a quarterback like Brady wins. One of the defining images of 2007 is Moss catching deep passes with defenders in perfect position. That's what made the season psychologically devastating. It wasn't just that the Patriots were beating teams. They were beating correct defense. The coverage would be good. The leverage would be correct. The safety rotation would be early. And Moss would still win, because his vertical leap and timing were almost impossible to counter. There's a game against the Cowboys in Week 6 that captures the helplessness. Dallas plays disciplined coverage for most of the game. They contain Brady. They limit the rhythm early. But late in the fourth quarter, the Patriots need a drive. Brady escapes pressure, launches deep. Moss adjusts mid-air and catches it with a defender on him. Touchdown. Game swings. Dallas did not blow coverage. They got beaten, and that's demoralizing. The key difference between good receiver and unguardable receiver is error tolerance. Most receivers require the throw to be perfect. Moss didn't. If the throw was slightly outside, he extended. If it was high, he elevated. If the corner was in phase, he boxed him out. If the safety arrived, he timed the jump to meet the ball at its apex. He widened the acceptable throw window for Brady. That's a quarterback's dream. By midseason, defenses tried something more desperate. Treat Moss like an entire side of the field. Rotate the safety early. Play cloud coverage over his side. Give up space elsewhere. It didn't work because the Patriots were built to punish you for leaving space. Welker underneath. Jabbar Gaffney on intermediate routes. Kevin Falk out of the backfield. Even tight ends creating mismatches. If you sold out on Moss, New England bled you slowly. If you didn't sell out on Moss, New England killed you quickly. Then the season turned historic. Randy Moss finished 2007 with 23 receiving touchdowns, breaking Jerry Rice's single-season record. Brady threw 50 touchdown passes. The Patriots went 16-0. And for much of the year, it felt like defensive coordinators were just choosing the type of death they preferred: quick or slow. The playoffs reinforced the point. New England's offense wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a hot streak. It was structural dominance. Moss drew constant attention, but he still produced. Brady trusted him in tight windows because Moss expanded the concept of open, and that's the deepest truth behind being unguardable. Open isn't always separation. Sometimes open is superiority at the catch point, and Moss was superior at the catch point even when covered. In the Super Bowl against the Giants, the Patriots' undefeated season ended, and the loss often overshadows the dominance. But that ending doesn't change the fact that 2007 was the clearest example of unguardable receiver impact in modern NFL history. Because for a full season, defenses weren't just outplayed, they were outstructured. And after 2007, defenses across the league quietly adjusted philosophy. Two high safety shells became more common long-term. Pass rush priority increased. Teams emphasized disrupting timing at the line more aggressively, because the league learned that if you allow the quarterback to hold the ball and let vertical routes develop, receivers like Moss become a cheat code. But Randy Moss wasn't just a 2007 story. His unguardable identity existed before New England. And after New England, his legacy became something even rarer. A receiver who made defensive fundamentals look fragile across multiple eras and multiple systems. And that's why his name still lives as a verb. Because the sport itself remembers him differently. After 2007, the NFL tried to explain Randy Moss in ways that made him feel normal. They called him a deep threat. They called him a jump ball specialist. They called him a freak athlete. All true, but those labels weren't big enough. Because unguardable isn't just about being fast or tall. It's about creating defensive contradictions, situations where every logical decision still ends badly. Randy Moss built his entire career on contradictions. If a corner pressed Randy Moss, Moss could win with speed. If a corner played off, Moss could win with cushion control and stride efficiency. If a safety shaded deep to eliminate the bomb, Moss opened the middle for everyone else and still found ways to win on fades and seams. If defenses bracketed Randy Moss, they sacrificed resources. And sacrificing resources is the first step toward losing. That's why coordinators hated him. Because Randy Moss didn't just beat your best corner, he changed what you were allowed to call. That impact becomes clearer when you compare him to other legends. Jerry Rice was the most complete receiver ever. Route discipline, hands, longevity, championships, totals that still feel untouchable. Terrell Owens was physical dominance, an all-terrain receiver who bullied corners and demanded volume. Calvin Johnson was the prototype nightmare, 6'5" power with speed that didn't match his frame. Julio Jones was the master of explosive separation. Each one created problems. But Randy Moss created a very specific kind of problem. He could win the game without touching the ball much. That is rare. Most elite receivers need rhythm. Targets build confidence. Volume creates control. Moss could break a defense with 5 targets. Sometimes 3. He could disappear for a quarter and then score twice in 2 minutes. That forced paranoia. Defenses couldn't relax. Cornerbacks couldn't play normal. Safeties couldn't gamble on other routes. Even when Moss wasn't involved in the play, he distorted the field. That's gravity. Randy Moss also redefined the idea of covered. For most receivers, being covered means the throw is risky. For Moss, being covered often meant the defender was simply in position to be beaten because Moss's catch-point dominance was unfair. He didn't jump like other receivers. He timed the jump so that the ball and his hands met at the apex. Defenders often jumped too early or too late. Moss rarely did. And timing beats height alone. That's why the phrase, getting mossed, became permanent. Because it describes a feeling defenders hate. I did my job, I was there, and I still lost. In football, defenders can accept getting beat by great route running. They can accept getting beat by speed. But losing when you're in correct position, that's psychological damage. That makes you play differently the next snap. And next snap football is where games are decided. The league's defensive philosophy evolved partly because of receivers like Moss. Too high safety looks became more normal long-term. Teams emphasized pass rush depth and pocket compression because the best way to stop vertical receivers is to stop time. If the quarterback can't hold the ball long enough to let deep routes develop, the receiver's vertical threat is reduced.